Uh, okay, so I guess we can start right away. I'd like to start off by reading the previous formative assessment that you had. Yeah. So I would like to apologize that we couldn't meet face to face for 2 weeks because the first week I had to go to Medan for a conference, and also we had a business meeting with um, you know the English Language Education Department Association. So I had no other option. Yeah, I had to go to Medan. That's the first week, and then the second week we also couldn't meet face to face synchronously because I had to consolidate with my fellow lecturers at the English Language Education Department. By the way, because we are now preparing for our accreditation. So we are going to face our pre-accreditation process, and the lecturers have to prepare a lot of things. And I happen to be one of the committee that have to prepare for the accreditation. And then last week I couldn't make it synchronously via Zoom because of that thing, yeah, because of the accreditation. Actually, for today, we are still having the accreditation. You might have read the letter that I sent you last week. Yeah, that actually the letter also tells us that even this week, uh, the lecturers that are part of the committee still have to have online meetings. Yeah, so yeah. However, I think that it's very important, at least for us to meet, face to face online, yeah, via Zoom. So yeah, we're meeting via Zoom for this week. Hopefully, for next week we can meet face to face. Yeah, hopefully, yes. So that's about it, and I'm admitting more students to join. Yeah. So hello everyone. For those of you who have just joined this Zoom session, and we have started this you know session. Yeah. And I'm gonna share the screen to review some of the that I've given you. Yeah. So do you see my screen, Faruk?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So everyone. Um, the last 2 weeks, I've given you these two tugas, yeah, these two assessments, right? So both of them are formative assessments. Now, the idea of formative assessment, do you guys still remember what is formative assessment? Anybody still remembers? Nobody? Okay, I'm gonna try to re-explain the idea to you. So if you still remember, depending on the function and also when the assessment is given, we can categorize assessment into at least two types. The first one is formative, the other one is summative assessment, right? So you guys will need to know that these two assessments are actually formative assessments. And by formative, I mean I use those two assessments to check, to measure your understanding, depending on the learning process that you have done independently. So I want to see how far you could understand the materials without me explaining the concepts yet. And because they are formative assessment, it means that they are assessment for learning. They are assessment for learning. Assessment untuk belajar. So I use these two assessments to check your understanding for the learning that you have done so that I can take further action to follow up that thing, to follow up the results. And formative assessment can be scored or may not be scored. And in this case, for the two assessments that you have had, I do not score them. I do not grade them. Yeah. So they are formative, they are assessment for learning, and in this case, I do not grade them. However, they are still important. Even though they're not graded, they are still important because you do not do them because they are formative, right? It is very likely that you do not understand the material at all. If you do not do any of the assessment or the assignments, it seems that you maybe not understand at least most of the concepts that you need to know. Yeah. And for those of you who have done the two assessments, congratulations because at least you have done learning by yourself independently. So I salute you for that. And the two assessments are important to be the foundation of the next meeting of the next topic. So yeah, I'm gonna review them both. I'm gonna review the two assessments. Yeah. So the first one we have meeting two. I substitute the material with an assessment, independent assessment, formative assessment about receptive and productive skills. Yeah. So that's our topic for meeting two. And then for meeting three, we have another topic about language testing and assessment principle. So let's get to the second meeting first. Let's get to the first assessment, to the first formative assessment. So in the first formative assessment, everyone, I ask you to write something in the text box, right? Ask you to write something in the text box. So I've given you this question, and this question actually asks you about the materials. Yeah? I ask you to summarize the materials. So anybody could help me to read the directions? Anyone? You can just unmute yourself. And then
Can I
anybody?
share?
Sure.
What are the main differences between assessing receptive and productive skills? In your opinion, why do you think language teachers need to understand how to assess receptive and productive skills?
Okay, thank you. Yes, so I asked you to compare, right? I asked you to compare between assessing receptive and assessing productive skills. Yeah. So I asked you to at least point out the main difference, right, between the two. First, we have receptive, and then the second one, productive skills. And then the next question is about your opinion. So why do you think language teachers need to understand how to assess receptive and productive skills? Anybody would like to share their answer or ideas? See, so here we have Nova and Angel and Nathaniel who have not completed the assessment. But let me check the UPay uh, friends here. So for the UPay friends, okay, very good. So all of you have submitted the assessment here. Here you may see some other names, but those are actually our friends from UKD who are studying at UPU because you belong to pertukaran mahasiswa, right? Program pertukaran mahasiswa. So, and the other six students that you see here are UKD students who are now studying at UPU, so they don't have to submit the assessment. But for our friends from UPU, it's great that all of you can submit your assessment. Very good. So anybody would like to share their answer if you still remember? Or maybe you can just unmute yourself if you would like to share your answer. You can share it based on what you remember, or you can ask me to open your answer so that you can just read. Would like to read instead. Anyone? Anyone? Well, I actually have checked most of your answers. Yeah. So I have checked most of your answers. There are something that we need to talk about. There are something to discuss, and there are some answers that are quite okay and quite good in this case about the understanding of receptive productive skills. So what is receptive skill anyway? Guys, to remember what is receptive skill? could you give me an examples of receptive skills? What are they? There are at least two types of receptive skills. Number one, read, count. what is what is the first type of receptive skill? It's not recount, definitely. Read, receptive skills? Yes, you can type in the chat box. Reading, very good, Jonathan. Audrey. Yeah, so reading, and then the second one, you have mentioned it as well. Yeah. So the second one is listening. Very good. So for receptive skills, we have reading and listening. Now, what about productive skills? Of course, you guys can guess. Yeah. You have speaking and writing. Yes. So receptive skills are reading and listening. And then productive skills are speaking and writing. Now, why do we need to distinguish between the two types, between receptive and productive skills? We try to relate it to language, testing and assessment. When you learn to test and to assess your students' language skill, why do you need to differentiate the two between receptive and productive skills? Anybody?
Sir, can I share my opinion?
Sure.
Okay, I think in reading and listening, the focus of the study is about how students can memahami materi yang mereka dapatkan, memahami terlebih dahulu seberapa mereka tahu tentang reading dan listening. Seperti itu. Kan banyak juga mungkin dari teacher memberikan buku bacaan dan listening juga untuk membantu di productive skill-nya. Dan productive skill nanti berhubungan dengan speaking berhubungan dengan grammar dan lain-lain. Ketika mahasiswa atau siswa sudah tahu tentang receptive skill-nya, maka dalam tanda kutip mereka sudah mampu untuk menerapkan productive skill yang mereka dapatkan dari receptive skill-nya. I think that's all.
Okay, very good. Yes. So, do you guys think that they both require different approach of assessment or of testing? Do you guys think that when you assess receptive skills, it's going to be different from when you're assessing productive skills, for example? Do you think it's going to be different, or do you think it's going to be similar or the same? Anyone?
I think different, sir.
Yes, exactly. Yes, very good. So Lita has understood the materials, I guess, about receptive skills. Now, it's important for you as language teachers to understand the nature of receptive and productive skills, because if you do not understand the nature means the hakikat, the it's like the it's like the definition, it's like what it's all about. Yeah. So if you do not understand what it's all about, receptive skills and productive skills, as language teachers, you will find big problems in testing or in assessing. Because as I said earlier, the good thing about being a teacher is that we are paid to test and to assess our students, right? Jarang-jarang loh yang dikasih, uh, kerjaan, digaji gitu, buat ngetes orang gitu. But of course, you cannot test your students recklessly. Recklessly means sembarangan gitu ya. Pokoknya dites saja, nilainya terserah saya. No, it means that you're not a good teacher. When you become a teacher, and then you are paid to assess and to test, of course you're gonna need to teach first. Perlu ngajarin dulu gitu kan. Kalau tiba-tiba dites langsung summative, lulus enggak diajarin ya nggak adil. You're a bad teacher gitu kan. But if you have taught gitu ya, and then dikasih assessment atau dikasih tes dan dinilai, nah itu uh, wajar karena sudah diajarkan gitu. Karena the score of the assessment, the result of the test would be the report, right? So in other words, when you become a teacher, you are paid to test and to assess because the results of the test and the assessment be your report. That's your responsibility, right? To report to the students and also to the parents because they pay for you, right? Anybody is paying for your own tuition by yourself? Like maybe you work part time and then you earn some money and then you pay for your college tuition by yourself. Anyone? Ada nggak yang sudah membayar kuliahnya sendiri tanpa, you know, tanpa merepotkan orang? Kalau sudah ada, it means that uh, your lecturers, me as one of your lecturers, I'm responsible to give you the report to yourself, right? Kalau yang bayar kalian sendiri gitu. But uh, if your parents are paying for your tuition, it means that I also am responsible for your parents, right? So the result of the test is my responsibility that I would provide not only to you but also your parents who pay for your tuition. So the result of the assessment would be, of course, the feedback and then the score, and then finally you're going to have the grade, right? So if you get a grade A, a grade B, a grade C, and so on, it's not only about good or bad, no, but it's about the report of your ability. Yeah. So if you ask me, sir, why do I get a C? Why do I get a C or why do I get a B, for example? Why can't I get A? Example, yeah. Well, because it's a report. It's not only a grade. So grade functions as a report. It means that your understanding, your skill needs to be improved if you want to get an A, something like that. So yeah, grade is not only grade, it's a report. So when you are reporting, you need to have a good criteria. When you are assessing, when you are testing, you need to have a good criteria, a good standard. Harus ada standarnya. Nggak boleh serampangan. Something like that. Apalagi kalau dinilai. Yeah. Okay, so that's about it. Now, when you are assessing listening and then when you are assessing speaking, how do you think the two are different? Bedanya gimana? You know that they are both different, but then how do you define the difference? Bedanya? Anybody could point out the difference between the two? Tes listening tuh kayak gimana sih biasanya? How do you have you ever experienced any listening test before?
Yes, sir.
Anybody? Yeah. So kayaknya yang jawab Lita semua ya. Yang paham betul cuma Lita ya dari semua mahasiswa. Masa yang paham betul cuma yes, that's right. Uh, so Lita, can you point out any example of listening test that you have experienced? So what did you do?
Okay, listening test that I have experience is when I apply a part-time job in LT, and there is like a TOEFL test because TOEFL have
TOEFL.
4 types, I think 4, grammar and then listening. Aduh lupa sir. Nah itu. Lalu untuk listening, yes,
reading,
but I
and
have but I have a little bit struggle because I cannot hear it well.
yeah. So very good. You mentioned TOEFL test, yeah, paper-based, right? ITP, yeah, institutional TOEFL test, yeah. So yeah, in ITP, TOEFL ITP or TOEFL PPT, usually we have listening as part of the 4 sections, right? That are tested, or 3 sections sometimes, yeah. So yeah, listening. In the listening, what did you do? In the listening section.
Okay, in the listening session we di beberapa soal gitu sir, terus langsung mengisi di pilihan ganda gitu sesuai dengan pertanyaan yang diajukan seperti itu.
But you had to listen first, right?
Yes.
Yeah, very good. So everyone, it's very important that you know the skill, the nature of the skill You know the what. Well, at first you guys will need to know the why. So there are three. Let's say I'm gonna summarize the the points, the aspects of testing and assessment for today in three. So when you are testing, when you are assessing, jadi guru diminta ngetes, diminta mengassess gitu ya, mengukur kemampuan siswa. Make sure that at least you know the answer to the three questions. The first one is the why, kenapa. So you need to know kenapa. Kenapa sih saya perlu ngetes? Kenapa sih saya perlu mengukur kemampuan siswa saya? Assess gitu ya. Why? So you need to know the why. And then the why might be found out from information in the syllabus, in the curriculum, or in the lesson plan, or in the material that you are teaching, for example. So you will find the why. Usually it's going to be related to the objective, for example, right? So why? Now, if we try to relate to the nature of listening, for example, as one of the four skills, you're going to need to know why you need to test the listening skill. Jadi saya perlu tes listening. Atau jangan-jangan saya nggak perlu tes listening. Nggak perlu ngetes listeningnya. Ini skill yang lain yang perlu saya tes. So know the why. You can also check the objective, tujuan pembelajarannya. Kan di silabus ada. Then the second one, after the, we have the what. What, right? So, for example, if you need to test your students' understanding of, let's say, job application process, lamaran pekerjaan, then that's the why, right? Why? Because I need to test my students' understanding their job application process. And then the next question that you need to ask yourself is what? What kind of skill do I need to test related to job application process? Do I need to test the listening skill, or do I need to test the reading skill, or the other skill? Okay. And then, okay, I need to test the listening skill. So if I need to test the listening skill, what is it about listening that I need to test? Do I need to test? Yeah. Because in listening, we have many components actually. So even within listening skill, you will find a lot of sub skills inside it. You'll find a lot of, like some scholars refer to it as macro skills and micro skills. Skills macro and micro, small, big and small skills. And so what kind of sub skills do we learn in listening? What kind of skills, what kind of strategies, what kind of activities do we do when we listen? For example, when you're having TOEFL tests, the kind of question in the listening section might be asking you to uh, focus on the pragmatic understanding. So that's going to be related to pragmatic skill of listening. Or maybe the questions might be asking about specific information based on the lecture, based on the conversation that you hear, right? So it might be about finding or looking for specific information from the listening passage, right? So there are there are actually many sub skills within listening, and the same goes with the other skills, with reading, writing, speaking. Now, in the listening test, maybe you might be asked to listen first and then answer some questions, probably, right? And then what about speaking? What about speaking? What kind of thing do you need to do? What kind of activity? Anybody? Have you ever had any speaking test before in other classes, in the previous classes?
Yes, sir.
Rita, in what classes?
Speaking for academic purposes in Ma'am Endang, and then in the class of I don't know, I forgot, sir. In Miss
Speaking
Arida's
for
class interview. Yes.
Okay, so let's say in the speaking for academic purposes. Yeah. So mention one of the exams. Then exam means test, right? Formal assessment test. So give me one example of the exam that exam or quiz that is scored. Yeah, that is great. That counts.
Okay,
Remember?
yes, I think in speaking for academic purposes, we got scored from like IELTS test, but only in speaking, and then we must answer the question from Ma'am Endang, like for example, in education in Indonesia, like what our opinion in 3 minutes, I think 1 minute or 3 minutes, we must speaking in English whole.
Yeah. So very good. So when you are having a speaking test, one thing that you need to do, of course, is to speak. That's the most important thing. So you are testing, you will not ask your students to write and then that's it. Okay, now write one paragraph and then, okay, your speaking score is 10, for example, just based on that one paragraph. No, that's not valid. Last week you have learned about validity, right? So it's not valid because when you say that it's a speaking test, then you need to ask your students to speak. Yeah, that's the most important thing. Of course, you can integrate it with other skills like maybe reading or listening, right? Ask them to listen first or read first. But don't forget the most important thing when you say that it's a speaking test, ask them to speak. That's the most important thing, right? So speaking. Now, Jonathan, you mentioned interview. Very good. Interview. In what class, Jonathan? Can you unmute yourself?
Sama sir, in Mem Endang's class.
In Guendang's class, yeah?
Yes.
Speaking for academic purposes. Who did you have to
Sorry sir.
who did you have to who did you interview?
So Bu Endang interview us. So
Oh,
she choose like a topic.
okay. So you became the interviewee and then
Yes.
Guendang became the
The
interviewer.
interview. Yes.
Okay, okay. Yeah, that's a speaking test, yeah, because you had to speak, you had to answer Guendang's questions, right? So
Yes.
if Guendang asked you some questions and then you didn't answer at all, it means that your speaking score will be not good. But if you could answer all the questions that Guendang asked during the interview, then it's gonna be probably you're gonna get a good score, right? So very good, Jonathan. Did did you feel satisfied with the result of the speaking for academic purposes?
No sir, because uh actually it's not because we can speak in English, but lebih ke we don't know
Content.
the answer. Like
So
for example, uh uh he he asked about uh pokoknya topiknya tuh tentang kesehatan gitu sir, and we don't know things in world of
yeah,
kesehatan itu tadi sir.
yeah.
So
So vocabulary.
yeah, so
O-
we can answer the question.
Okay. Yeah. Very good point, Joe. Yeah. So yeah. Now we have another component, everyone. So if previously we have talked about at least there are four skills, right? Reading, listening, speaking, and writing. Don't forget there are other components of language. We have grammar, then we have vocabulary, then we have other components. Now, when we are considering speaking, for example, of course you're going to need vocabulary. You do not know any vocabulary, you won't be able to speak, right? You won't be able to speak. The same goes with listening, reading, writing. When you try to understand the what, and then the what is, say, speaking, for example, you need to try to analyze what is involved in the speaking process. Now, Joe mentioned that vocabulary is very important because it affects your understanding of the content, right? If you are asked questions about medical things, about health, for example, and then you don't have enough vocabulary in health or in medical things, then you wouldn't be able to speak effectively because you don't have enough, you know, knowledge about the vocabulary. So yes, vocabulary is also in, yeah, speaking. Very good. Yes. What about grammar? Do you guys think that grammar is also involved in speaking?
Yes,
What
sir.
about yes? Okay. Very good. Yeah, grammar is involved, but it's not going to be as prominent as in writing. So, yeah, speaking because, or you can try to conceptualize as the grammar of speaking is bit different in terms of the process of usage. Yeah, when we compare it to writing, so they sort of have different grammatical mechanics, but they both have their own thing, something like that. So yeah, we actually use grammar in speaking. If you do not If I ask you to answer this, uh, for example, Farooq, where are you from? And then if you say, I'm from Jogja, it's a grammatical sentence, right? Even though it's speaking, but Farooq is using the right grammatical sentence. But then if I ask like, in Darto, where are you from? And then the response is something like, Jogja from I, for example. Uh, it's not grammatical and it will influence the speaking itself, right? So grammar is involved, yeah. And then vocabulary, and then what about pronunciation? Do we have pronunciation in speaking?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, very good. I heard three students speaking, yeah. And the name that is coming up on my screen is Laura, yeah. That's what I didn't know the other. I didn't notice the other two students, but I heard three students. Very good. Students, yeah. So um, pronunciation is definitely involved in speaking. So it means that you may assess pronunciation as part of speaking skill, right? As part of your teaching of speaking skill. Yeah. Very good. Pronunciation. Do we involve pronunciation in reading, for example? Do you need pronunciation in reading?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So why? Why do we need pronunciation in reading? If you ask me, I'm gonna say that maybe yes, but not that prominent. So pronunciation is usually about speaking. Uh, so we related to the nature of the skills. Everyone, when you ask me personally, but do you think that pronunciation is part of reading? For me, I would consider it to be not that crucial in reading, but it's more crucial in speaking because pronunciation is about producing the language. Pronouncing means speaking the language, right? Producing through speech, that's pronunciation. Now, in reading, what is more important, I think, is of course vocabulary is still important. The grammar is also that. Uh, it's not really pronunciation, but it's more like like semantics, knowledge about the meaning of that the words and then of the sentence and then knowledge about uh, you know the understanding of the something like that. So yeah, pronunciation might be included in reading aloud, but even some scholars might debate it. Teachers might debate it. How reading aloud is actually speaking, right? Because when you read aloud, you speak, although it has some reading. So it's sort of an integrated skill, something like that. Yeah, but anyway, from this, getting to the second question, yeah, the what, when you are testing or assessing different skills, you're gonna need to understand the skills entirely. Like when you are testing the speaking, you need to understand what is meant by speaking, what aspects are involved, when speaking, so that you understand the task or the assessment that is right for the skill. If you do not understand the skill fully, you will not be able to design the task or the assessment effectively, right? So the understanding about the what is very important for you to design the right test and assessment. Now, that's the second question, right? So we have the why do I need to test or to assess? And then the second one is the what do I need to test or assess? That includes the topic, right? We are testing your students' reading skill about recount text. That's also included in the what, right? Recount text, the topic. Now, the third question is going to be about how. So why, what, and how. How do I need to test my students? How do I need to assess my students? How? Now, if you need to test your students' reading skill on the context, how can you test? How do you assess your students? Anybody has any ideas? So how can we test our students' reading skill on recount? How? So you can talk about the format of the assessment or the kind of assessment or the method to assess or to test. Ya, tesnya kayak gimana? Contoh tesnya kayak anyone? Buat ngetes reading tentang recount. Ada yang punya ide? Kita sampai jam 9 ya. Anyone? How do we assess or how do we test reading skill about recount? Yes? Heard somebody speak.
Yeah,
Esther, yes?
maybe bisa like kita memberikan satu bacaan gitu, panjang dan tingkat kesulitan bacaannya tergantung lagi dengan jenjang jenjang peserta didiknya. And then setelah mereka membaca, mereka menuliskan ulang apa yang mereka pahami dari bacaan itu. Kayak gitu. Ya, like garis besar dari bacaan itu apa sih menurut mereka gitu.
Okay, very good, Esther. Yes. So, dikasih bacaan. What kind of bacaan, Esther? What kind of text? What kind of passage? For example, if you are testing reading skill about recount text for, say, SMP or SMA, let's say SMP, I haven't checked whether recount text is there in the SMP group. Say, just for the sake of giving you example, if you're testing recount text, reading skill about recount text at the for the SMP level, then what kind of text can you give?
Maybe misalnya bacaan tentang apa ya? Tentang biologi
Okay.
misalnya satu topik gitu, kan anak SMP juga belajar biologi dasar. Em, Tentang sistem what I said, photosynthesis gitu, and then there are process of photosynthesis in that text, and then after that I asked them to explain to me about the process of photosynthesis that they read before from the text.
Okay, Esther, for that part, I need to correct a little bit of your understanding about the text. So it's included in the what, yeah. So why, what, and how. Now, when the what is reading skill about recount text, don't forget that you need to test the recount text, the understanding of the recount. So if the kind of text that we give the students is something like the process or the procedure or let's say the process of a certain biological, you know, uh, reaction or biological processing. I mean, the stages or the steps or the, you know, mechanisms of a certain biological process, then the kind of text would be not recount, but what type of text do you think, Esther or the other, if anyone can help? process about how something occurs or how something happens? Anyone? What kind of
Um,
text? What is the genre? It's not recount, but somebody tells you. Yes, as the process. Yes, you can say as a process. Another name for that would be how something happened. Yes, what is the name of the genre? Process? Yeah, process bisa, but we have more familiar term for that. Genre text itu ada apa aja sih? We have recount, we have narrative. They have similar structure, right? Recount and narrative. Procedure text, yes. Procedure text is about how to do something. But what about the steps that explains how something happens naturally or how some things,
yeah,
occur naturally?
I
Another
think it is descriptive text, maybe sir, because itu menjelaskan yang sudah terjadi, bukan bukan gimana ya?
almost descriptive,
How
almost
how
as the,
how can I? Yeah.
almost descriptive is more like describing something, to describe something. When you have to explain how something works, it's gonna be E, start from E. X, anybody? What about from
Mm,
our friends from UPI, right? Esther, yes? Or Lita or Mika, anybody? Expository. Yes, expository text, right? Yeah, but getting back to the topic, recount. What about recount? If we are to test our students' understanding, reading understanding about recount text, yes, we can use Esther's method of testing, right? We can give the students a text. Now, what kind of text? It should be a recount. What? Can anyone give me any topic of recount text for SMP that is suitable for SMP? Anyone? Recount is something that tells an event that really happened in the past. That's recount. So what kind of recount text do you think is suitable for SMP students? Or what kind of topic of recount text that is suitable for SMP students? Something that tells text that tells events or experience that happened in the past. That's big. Anyone? For example, diary. So diary is going to be an example of big context, right? Because diary tells something that happened in the past, experience in the past. Another example might be um, like letter, for example, personal letter that tells experience in the past, or maybe it can be something like um, let's say memoir or something like an essay that tells about something that happens in the past of a person's life or a person's experience. So that's a recount text, yeah. Okay, so let's say we give a text for the students to read, for example, diary. Yeah, we can give the students a piece of diary, yeah, diary. Kemudian mereka baca gitu. And then what do we do next? Maybe we can ask the students to rewrite. Without reading the diary, we can ask the students to rewrite, like what Esther said. Yeah, we ask them to rewrite the diary using their own words. That's like retelling something, right? Yeah, I agree with that. So what do you need to have then? So we know the how now. We can give the students the text, then we can ask them to retell. And then how do we, what do we do next? We're gonna need to know how to score, right? How to grade the students' work. Kalau mereka sudah nulis, if the students have written the their own words about this the recount text, the diary, and then they submit the work to you as the teacher. What do you need to do next? You need to score, right? You need to grade, you need to evaluate. Nah, skornya gimana kalau kerjaannya dalam bentuk tulisan disetor mungkin dalam bentuk paper or via email, right? So how do you score? Anybody? Jadi sebenarnya itu tadi contoh yang dikasih Esther tuh integrated skill, ada skill reading, ada skill writing yang dilibatkan di sana. Very good, Esther. So you guys can use a rubric, scoring rubric. Yeah. So if you are assessing, one more term, everyone, open-ended test or open-ended assessment, you guys need to have the so-called scoring rubric. Ya. Kalau mau menilai essay, paragraf, tulisan, rekaman video, kalau tes speaking ya. Jadi siswanya kalian minta buat bikin video, presentasi apa, terus disubmit gitu. Nilainya nggak bisa tuh pakai answer key. Beberapa jenis mungkin masih bisa, tapi kebanyakan sih nggak bisa. Biasanya, the thing that you can use to score or to evaluate or to grade your students' work when it is open-ended, like paragraph, like video, is rubric. You guys need to have a rubric. So if you check my syllabus, kalau kalian coba cek silabus saya, ada rubrik nggak di sana? Anybody? Ada ya. So this is an example of a rubric. Nah, di sini final project. Berarti from this you will know that final projectnya pasti bukan jawab soal pilihan ganda. Pasti bukan itu. Kalau jawab soal pilihan ganda, ngapain saya bikin rubrik? Harusnya bikin apa? Anyone? Kadang-kadang soal reading itu kan bisa berupa pilihan ganda. 10 atau 20 pertanyaan dikasih pilihannya. Terus milih A, B, C, D, E. Pilih apa ditulis, kemudian di submit. We cannot use rubric to score multiple choice questions, yeah, reading questions. So how can you assess multiple choice reading questions? How can you score? How can you grade? You need
Kunci jawaban, sir.
kunci jawaban. Very good, Audrey. Yes. Answer balik, Megan. Not key answer, but answer key. Yes. So we need an answer. Punya kunci jawaban. Jadi kalau close-ended, like multiple choice, like filling in the blank that is very limited in terms of the answer, we can use answer. Or maybe answering simple questions, just in short answers, yeah, you can use answer. But if it is like open-ended, like producing paragraph, writing a paragraph, like reciting or videotaping and then submitting the video, then it's gonna be using rubric. That's gonna be important. Any questions? Kalau ada pertanyaan, langsung menyela tuh. Saya malah senang.
Pak,
Yes, Esther.
how to make a good rubric for reading tests,
Very good.
for reading
That's
assessment?
that's gonna relate to our next topic of review. Yeah. So the previous week, you guys have learned about the principles of assessment and tests, right? Very good. So I guess we can move on to the next topic, yeah, everyone. The principles of language assessment and test. Yeah? Or do you guys have any questions about the receptive and productive skills?
Sir,
Yes, okay.
okay, I have a question. If their receptive skills are not good and their productive skills are better, can the student be said to be smart or proficient in language?
Okay. Getting back to your question, you mentioned the phrase language proficiency, right? Can we say that somebody is proficient in a language? So it means that we need to assess the language proficiency, right? So getting back to the three questions, why? Okay, let's say the why is because I need to check my students' language proficiency. That's the why. Then the what? You need to know the what, right? If you need to assess your students' language proficiency, first thing first, you're gonna need to understand what is meant by language proficiency, just the same as the previous questions. You need to assess the listening, first thing first, or the second thing that you need to understand is the what. What is listening? Or maybe if you need to test the reading skill about recount, you need to understand what reading skill is, what kind of reading skill is relevant to reading a recount, and then you understand What is the read context? Now, getting back to my test question, I need to assess the student's language proficiency. That's the why, because I need to assess the student's language proficiency. And then the what. What is language proficiency? How do you define language proficiency? Mega or anybody else can help? Kita menyebut seseorang jago berbahasa tuh, language proficiency itu terdiri dari apa aja sih? Atau language proficiency itu apa sih? Anyone? That's the one. Okay, so it depends on what you define by language proficiency. Tergantung yang dimaksud Mega kecakapan berbahasa itu bahasa yang atau kecakapan yang kayak gitu, something like that. Now, if you refer to the TOEFL's definition, kalau balik ke TOEFL's definition, what is language proficiency according to the TOEFL's makers? Yang bikin TOEFL tuh language proficiency menurut mereka apa? Mereka berpikir yang pasti ya kalau IT itu ada grammar, ada listening, ada reading. Writing nggak terlalu ada karena tesnya susah, something like that. If you ask different test makers, some others might say that language proficiency at least encompasses reading, listening, speaking, and writing. If you ask the Merdeka curriculum makers, the government, ya, Kemdikbud Ristek gitu ya, yang bikin kurikulum Merdeka tuh, kurikulumnya sekolah-sekolah, they might say that language proficiency not only involve the 4 skills, but there are actually 6 skills. Kalau di kurikulum Merdeka tuh, yang sekarang versi terbaru, we actually have 6 skills. Ada memirsa, sama ada, satu lagi apa? Menyimak. Terus ada presentasi juga, kemudian ada nanti
Menyimak.
kita bisa cek ya. Menyimak, memirsa, presentasi. Nanti kita bisa cek. But there are 6 skills. Nah, berarti kan tergantung language proficiency itu kan mendefinisikan. Tapi pada dasarnya namanya kecakapan berbahasa itu ya pasti skillnya bermacam-macam. Karena berbahasa itu kan it's not only speaking. Somebody can speak well, but if you ask him or her to write, maybe it's going to be different. Because speaking skill, as you said, is different from writing skill. Assessing receptive skill is going to be different from assessing productive skill and vice versa, right? So, jadi jawabannya gimana ya, Nick? Jika tanya ke saya malah tanya lagi. So, how do you define it? For example, if you ask your student to do reading test and then they can perform well, atau reading and writing test and they can perform well, can we say that he's proficient in the language? Any idea? Well, I can say that at least the student is proficient in the skill that is tested. So if it is a reading test and then the student scores well in the reading test, I can say that at least he or she is proficient in the reading skill that is being tested. If you get more precise, if you want to get more precise, you can say that at least the student is proficient in the skill that is being tested, and that is reading, for example, and then in the topic that is being tested, and that is recounts, right? Because who knows? For example, if the student is given a different text, maybe it's going to be a different result, right? Kalau teksnya beda, karena belum pernah baca. So ya, yeah, memang kadang-kadang perlu spesifik gitu. Makanya kalau kita mengklaim ya bahwa tes yang kita bikin ini adalah language proficiency test, biasanya jarang yang cuma jawab 10 pertanyaan. Sebagai contoh language proficiency test itu apa? Tadi ada what? Tadi yang dikasih contoh sama kita tadi. Can you give an example of language proficiency test? There is standard, standardized, and then non-international. So,
TOEFL.
TOEFL, very good. Yes, Lita and Joe, yes, TOEFL. TOEFL is a language proficiency test. That's why when you are taking TOEFL, you will not only sit for 5 minutes and then done. Now, how long do you need to take to complete TOEFL? Yang lengkap ya, bukan cuma readingnya atau listening. Lengkapnya itu berapa jam? Jam kan? So that's language proficiency test. Karena language itu kompleks. It includes at least 4 skills. Bahkan bukan cuma 4, karena di dalam 4 skills itu ada sub-components-nya juga. Bahkan kadang-kadang integrated tadi ya. Integrated. Presentasi itu dia menggabungkan antara menulis dan berbicara ya. Presenting, right? Karena harus bikin PPT. Bahkan termasuk kemampuan memilih gambar and so on, right? So something like that. So at least 4 skills, and then we have integrated skills. We can combine one skill with another, something like that. And then we also have other sub-components like vocabulary, like grammar, like pronunciation, right? Kalau bikin tes grammar saja pasti berbeda format tesnya. Grammar itu mungkin suruh nyusun kalimat gitu. Atau bikin tes vocab saja mungkin akan berbeda. Di kelas vocab mungkin tesnya akan berbeda dengan kelas pronunciation kalau ada, right? So something like that. Is it answering your question, Mega?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. So language proficiency itu memang cakupannya luas. Saya biasanya akan spesifik ke tesnya itu dia tes tentang apa dulu. Gitu. Biasanya kalau tes yang luas dan dia mengklaim mengetes language proficiency kayak TOEFL, kayak IELTS, memang butuh waktu lama dan yang dites komponennya banyak. Karena language itu memang banyak skill. Atau setidaknya ada 4 tadi. Tapi bisa lebih karena bisa dikombinasikan, ada sub skillnya dan sebagainya. Grammar, vocab, pronunciation, and so on. Yes. Okay, so I guess we can move on to the next topic, and that's about the principles. Now, for the principles of language assessment and testing, I've asked you to, rate. Ini juga formative assessment, nggak dinilai, tapi sebenarnya berguna untuk saya ngecek gitu ya. Mahasiswa saya paling bingung di mana gitu ya. And from this, I can see that most of you are confused about this one, washback, right? Ada yang jawab satu nih. Kemudian sama di ini, validity, right? Ini ada 2 orang yang jawab kurang lebih berarti. Sama practicality. Kalau reliability mungkin ya cukup gitu. But anyway, atau coba saya jelaskan saja. Practicality. What is meant by practicality? And a test that is practical is a test that is what? Yang gimana? How? Anyone? Ini tesnya nggak praktis nih, nggak praktikal. Ya, kalau nggak praktis, nggak praktikal tuh berarti tesnya nih. Anybody? For example, if I ask you to do a reading test for 10 hours, do you think that is practical? Can you
No,
conduct a...
no.
No, right? Bayangin tiba-tiba kalau kalian jadi guru and then you come to the class and then you ask your students, okay, students, now we're gonna have a reading test. Now I'm gonna give you, reading questions. I'm gonna give you the test sheets, and then I'm gonna ask you to read and answer the questions for 10 hours. Your students will be protesting, right? Mereka langsung auto demo kalau diminta jawab pertanyaan reading selama 10 jam gitu. So it's not practical. Why is it not practical? First, in terms of the duration, doesn't make sense. In terms of the effectiveness, it is definitely not effective. Masa reading 10 jam nggak efektif, waktunya nggak ada. And then you can think of the budget. If you are to test your students about reading for 10 hours, think of the number of pages that you need to print. Soalnya berapa lembar itu buat 10 jam. It's not budget friendly, it's not economic. So In conclusion, we can say that it's not practical. Yeah, it's not practical. And then we can even get to the content itself. If you're testing reading, do you really think that you need 10 hours? I don't think that people nowadays read for 10 hours at one sitting. No, they don't do it at one time sit, right? Dengan duduk baca 10 jam itu ya nggak ada yang kuat, nggak ada yang. So it's not practical. So practical itu berarti yang gimana? Anyone? Ya yang efektif, efisien, praktis dan bisa dilakukan. Practical bisa dilakukan, make sense. Secara budget masuk akal, secara waktu masuk akal, secara jumlah soal masuk akal, gitu ya. No special tools needed. Bisa sih pakai special tools as long as the tools are relevant. Selama tools yang dipakai itu relevant. Test speaking pakai VR itu bisa kalau jumlah siswanya cuma 3 orang, terus gantian nanti pakai virtual reality pakai Google Lens itu boleh-boleh aja. Jadi mereka menjelaskan yang dilihat di Google Lens-nya itu, ya boleh. If your students are only 3 people, gitu ya. But if you have 10 students, then the test is not going to be practical. So it also depends on the number of students actually. Tergantung. If you are using let's say audio player, ya pakai audio player, and then you only have one audio player with only one speaker at the front of the class, and then you're going to hold a listening test, and then the number of students is, let's say, 100 students. I don't think that is practical because probably those 50 or 60 or 70 students at the back wouldn't be able to hear the audio, so it's not practical. So it also includes consideration about the tools, about the equipment. Yes, definitely. But we need to say that a practical test is usually a test that uses reasonable, effective, and relevant tools. Ya. Special tools boleh asal relevant, effective, and efficient. Gitu. Memang make sense dan bisa dilakukan. Tidak mempengaruhi administration dari tesnya. Kalau tesnya dilakukan di luar kelas, kemudian pakai pakai audio player yang tadi, it doesn't make sense. It's not practical because if it's outside the classroom, it's not going to be conducive, right? Ruangnya ya nggak kondusif, space-nya nggak kondusif karena di luar, something like that. So that's practicality. Yes, bisa dilakukan. That's right. So thank you, Joe and Esther. Very good. Now, the next one, reliability. What about reliability? Tes yang baik itu tes yang practical, number one, basically. The second one is reliable. So, what is meant by, if we say that a test is reliable, what is meant by that? Reliable. Tes yang reliable is a test that is consistent. Sebuah tes yang reliable adalah tes yang consistent. Jadi tadi practicality, ini kalau mau baca rangkumannya. And then reliable test. A reliable test, see, consistent. So a reliable test is a test that is consistent. What is meant by consistent? Anybody would like to explain? Let me help. So a test that is consistent is, you may imagine when you have one student, yeah, you have one student, and then you're gonna give like a proficiency test at TOEFL or IELTS. So TOEFL or IELTS tests might be considered reliable if that same test, when given to that one student at 2 different times, yield similar result. Jadi ada satu siswa nih, for example, siapa ya? For example, Cindy. Cindy mau saya kasih tes TOEFL, and then when I give Cindy TOEFL test in the morning, for example, and Cindy produces the score of, let's say, TOEFL ITP, ya, let's say 600, skornya 600 sih, bagus sekali. And then, if I give Cindy the same instruments of test, saya ngasih instrumen tes yang sama gitu ya, TOEFL tadi, soal TOEFL. I give Cindy, tadi kan in the morning, skornya 600, and then I give Cindy the same test, let's say, the next day, atau the next 2 days, atau the next 5 days, gitu. Mungkin jaraknya biar agak lama gitu ya, atau the next 1 week mungkin ya, biar lebih lama lagi jaraknya, jadi nggak ada efek test retestnya. Jadi Cindy nggak ingat soalnya gitu, mungkin dikasih jeda waktu 1 minggu atau 1 bulan. And then, tapi kadang kalau 1 minggu atau 1 bulan bisa jadi kemampuan Cindy juga improve, kemampuan bahasa. Jadi kadang-kadang jeda waktunya itu juga perlu dipertanyakan juga. But let's say for example, if I give Cindy 1 week later, I give Cindy that same instrument of TOEFL test, and then Cindy still produces, not really different result, ya masih di sekitar 600, naik turunnya nggak terlalu tinggi gitu. We can say that the test is probably reliable because the result is consistent, right? Berarti karena dia ngetes proficiency berbahasanya Cindy, terus hasilnya ya relatif konsisten dalam satu. Mungkin kan kemampuannya juga belum terlalu signifikan kan perubahan. So we can say that instrumennya itu probably reliable. Another way untuk bilang apakah sebuah tes itu reliable atau enggak itu adalah when you make an instrument of test, let's say reading test, and then you give the reading test to let's say, or maybe to one student, masih ke satu siswa, jadi Cindy di tes reading gitu, dikasih instrumen pertanyaan reading, and then let's say if there are 2 lecturers or 2 teachers that is checking the result of the reading atau speaking, mungkin bahkan speaking test, ada 2 dosen atau 2 guru yang menilai ketika hasilnya mirip berarti instrumennya reliable because the instrument can guide the teachers to produce the same or similar results to that one student. Nah itu kan konsisten, berarti instrumennya konsisten. Instrumen yang nggak konsisten adalah, nggak reliable adalah when tadi ketika Cindy di tes speaking, dikasih soal speaking, yang menilai 2 guru, kedua dosen, hasilnya beda jauh. Yang satu nilainya 100, yang satu nilainya 50 atau hanya 20 itu kan jeglek. Jeglek itu beda jauh gitu. So it means that the instrument is probably not reliable karena instrumennya tidak berhasil mengguide 2 teacher itu untuk produce the same result. Karena yang dites kan sama. Dites kan satu siswa. Ya silakan. Yes. So Master tadi cakap. So itu konsistensi. Nah konsistensi itu mungkin bisa dibuat dengan kalau pakai rubrik ya rubriknya yang jelas. Kalau bikin pertanyaan ya pertanyaannya yang jelas. Karena rubrik tadi kan dipakai buat menilai. Kalau rubriknya nggak jelas, menilainya juga susah. Apalagi kalau gurunya beda, rubriknya nggak jelas, wah hasilnya pasti jadi subjektif kan. Nah, rubrik jelas, satu lah. Jadi rubrik can actually reduce subjectivity and increase reliability, something like that. Kalau open-ended. Kalau multiple choice ya, for example, you can use answer key. Answer key itu kan bisa memastikan bahwa hasilnya sesuai, konsisten. Siapapun yang pakai instrumen itu, kalau udah ada answer key kan pasti hasilnya, scoringnya ya standar sama. That's consistency. Reliable test is consistent. Hasilnya konsisten. Gak mencela-mencela tesnya, instrumen. Yes. And then the next one is itu reliability. Kalau ada pertanyaan silakan. After reliability we have validity. Now what about validity? Anyone? Ada yang tahu validity? When you say that a test is valid, it means that the test, a valid test is a test that measures what it needs to measure. Gimana tuh? Ada yang bisa menjelaskan? Tes yang valid tuh yang tes yang mengukur yang seharusnya diukur. So if you are giving a reading test, you say that I'm a teacher and I'm going to give you a reading test. But then the instructions ask the student to write. Is it valid? Nah, tadi di awal saya bilang valid. Valid atau enggak? Tesnya reading, terus instruksinya silahkan menulis 5 paragraf tentang 5 paragraf tentang pendapat Anda mengenai topik ini. Is it valid or not? Can we say that it's
No,
no?
sir.
No. Why not? Yes, the answer is no. But why not? Apa nggak valid?
Karena tidak mengukur apa yang seharusnya diukur tadi, sir.
Very good, Christian. Yes. Harusnya ngukur reading, tapi yang disuruh malah suruh nulis pendapatnya. It's a writing test, not a reading test. So we can say that the test doesn't assess, doesn't measure what it should be measuring, what it should assess gitu ya. Seharusnya kan nggak mengukur itu. Kalau reading ya tesnya harus reading, harus membaca. Something like that. Yes, very good. So itu valid, validity. Ada kriteria untuk mengukur validity tapi saya jelaskan sebentar. The next one is authenticity. Karena kita ngomongin tes bahasa atau assessment bahasa ya, a good language test or a good language assessment is one that is authentic. So what is authenticity? Authentic itu kayak gimana ya? An authentic test is a test that reflects the real world usage of the language. So berarti tes yang authentic itu kayak gimana? Anyone? A test? Yes. Siap ada. Siap. Pengalaman. Yes. So for example, mau ngetes speaking, mau ngetes atau reading, for example, mau ngetes reading. If I ask you to let's say, if I ask you, for example, you belong to a course, kalian ceritanya ikut kursus bahasa Inggris gitu ya sama saya, I become your teacher. Then your job is a pilot. Kalian seorang pilot, and then the class is an ESP class, English for Specific Purposes. And then it means that I'm teaching you English so that you can function, you can do your job as a pilot, sehingga kalian bisa melakukan pekerjaan kalian sebagai seorang pilot menggunakan bahasa Inggris. Berarti bahasa Inggris yang saya ajarkan kan bahasa Inggris untuk pilot gitu kan. Then when I teach you, I also need to assess your skill, right? I need to test you to give you the report, right? Buat ngasih report pembelajaran kalian tuh kayak gini loh, hasilnya kayak gini. So I need to test you, I need to assess you. Now, would you consider, for example, yeah, if I give you a test for that English for Pilots course, yeah, so English for Pilot course, you know, I give you the test by asking you to answer 20 multiple choice questions about, let's say, grammar or about, let's say, a reading text on biology. Tadi Esther mention about biology gitu. Jadi kelasnya English for Pilots, tapi saya ngasih tes. Oke, katakanlah pilot itu perlu kemampuan membaca, for example, baca dalam bahasa Inggris. But then, if tesnya itu saya minta mereka menjawab multiple choice questions tentang grammar dari sebuah teks bacaan di bidang biologi, atau mungkin saya minta mereka menjawab multiple choice question gitu tentang teks di bidang biologi atau topiknya biologi. Do you think that it's authentic? I don't know.
No, sir.
No, very good one, very good option. Yes. So yes, it's not authentic. Why? Firstly, the topic is not authentic ya, and not valid, invalid. Topiknya katanya tentang pilot tapi kok malah biologi. And then the secondly, it's not authentic because pilot do not answer multiple choice questions when doing their job. Gak ada kan pilot pekerjaannya jawab multiple choice question A, B, C gitu. Gak. Right? So the test is not authentic. Contoh tes yang authentic buat kelas bahasa Inggris untuk pilot apa? Yang authentic itu berarti menunjukkan kemampuan berbahasa Inggris yang memang kepake di job itu karena English for pilots. Right? So what is authentic test? Di peserta didiknya yang seorang pilot atau grup pilot itu diminta ngapain? Tes bahasa Inggris. You can ask them to make announcement during the landing. Kan kalau mau landing itu pilot biasanya bikin pengumuman tuh speaking berarti tesnya speaking. You can ask them to produce speech atau speech itu maksudnya speaking. You can ask them to speak an announcement during the landing process. That's authentic. Karena di pekerjaan mereka memang harus melakukan itu. Ladies and gentlemen, yang landing tuh pas mau landing. Simulasi penerbangan, yes. Tapi ingat tesnya bahasa Inggris ya, berarti jangan lupa karena kalian tes bahasa ya harus bahasa Inggrisnya, bukan tes nyetir, bukan tes menerbangkan pesawat, no, tapi tes memakai bahasa Inggris saat melakukan pekerjaan pesawat atau saat sebelum menerbangkan, setelah menerbangkan kan pilot juga harus pakai bahasa Inggris mungkin kalau mereka keluar sakit. Yes. Mungkin membuat basic conversation antara pilot and co-pilot. Very good. Yes. Bisa conversation antara pilot and co-pilot. Yes. Very good. Very good. Yes. Itu authenticity. Jadi tesnya itu jangan sekedar ngetes, kalau bisa yang authentic, yang menunjukkan kapan bahasa itu dipakai oleh peserta didik juga. Apakah memang perlu dipakai dalam hal itu? Kayak gitu. That's authenticity. The last one is washback. Ada yang tahu washback itu apa? Tes yang baik itu ya kalau bisa ya washbacknya positif kalau bisa, atau negatif washbacknya kalau bisa diminimas. So what is washback? Washback is the testing effect or the assessment effect. For example, when I say that a test can have a negative washback, it means that the test can have negative effect to the student. And what I mean by effect here is effect on learning, efek dalam pelajaran. If you ask the students to perform in front of a big audience, the test might have a negative effect. What do you think is the negative effect? Meskipun we can debate about it. Kadang-kadang negative washback itu bisa tetap dipertahankan selama memang itu perlu. But then, as I said, asking the students, testing the students to perform in front of a very large audience can have a negative effect, negative washback. What is the negative washback? Kalau perform di depan 100 audience, kira-kira negative washback. Are you okay? Will you be okay to perform in front of 100 audience? If you have a good language skill and a good confidence, maybe you will say that I'm okay. But for some students, they might have negative washback, like anxiety. Very good, Audrey. Yes. Jadi anxiety itu bisa jadi negative washback. But tadi saya bilang bisa didebatkan. Like for example, kalau kita ngomongin kelas public speaking, karena nggak mau ngasih negative washback, terus tesnya nggak ada yang perform in front of audience, padahal kelasnya public speaking. So if you ask me as the teacher or as the lecturer of public speaking, I would debate you by saying that the negative washback the anxiety, I mean, is still worth it. It is still worth doing. Masih apa ya? Itu tuh perlu gitu. Meskipun efeknya negatif, tapi itu because in real life, when you are becoming a teacher or a speaker, you will have to do that in front of a large audience, for example. So, ya, beberapa negatif prospek itu masih bisa atau masih layak dipertahankan because of authenticity. Karena otentik kan, otentik, authenticity. Jadi kadang-kadang negatif prospek itu bisa jadi uh, tetap dipertahankan karena authenticity. Tapi ada negatif prospek yang sangat negatif tuh, for example, like UN, ujian nasional dulu, negatif prospeknya apa? Zaman-zaman ujian nasional. Sekarang kan udah nggak ada negatif prospeknya. You know, ujian nasional is a national exam is an exam at the time that was designed to determine whether the students can pass or not, right? Whether they can pass SMP or SMA gitu ya. Di akhir kan kelas 3 waktu zaman saya dulu masih ada UN. Jadi kalau kelas 3 SMP atau SMA suruh ngerjain UN nasional tesnya beberapa hari per hari itu biasanya ada mata pelajaran. Terus kalau hasilnya jelek nggak lulus, berarti dia harus nggak bisa lulus SMP atau nggak bisa lulus SMP. Something like that. Itu ada negative aspeknya juga. Negative aspeknya apa? Kalau nilai itu kan result, tapi negative aspeknya kalau dikasih UN kayak gitu, efek negatifnya ke belajar dia. Ada anxiety nggak? Do you have anxiety? Takut nggak lulus, right? Anxiety, yes. So bayangkan apa kuliah belajar 3 tahun di SMK atau di SMA hanya dites dalam beberapa hari. So maybe that's the reason why national exam is abolished, right? National exam sekarang udah nggak ada, udah dihilangkan. Ya, kalau nggak lulus biasanya harus remedial, nggak bisa lulus SMA. Pokoknya harus lulus UN dulu, standar UN, biar bisa dikatakan lulus SMP. Nah, makanya sekarang dihapuskan karena itu tadi. Ya masa belajar selama 3 tahun diukur hanya dalam beberapa hari. Something like that. That's negative prospect. Negative prospeknya ya itu tadi. Anxiety, nervousness, and then the students will nyontek kan banyak. Zaman dulu kasus UN nyontek tuh banyak. Berarti itu negative prospect juga. Stress and so on. Yes. Very good. Tapi ya itu tadi kadang-kadang stress, anxiety itu perlu when it's authentic atau when it's useful. Karena itu tadi in life we will often experience anxiety and oftentimes anxiety signifies growth, right? Seringkali anxiety keguguran itu juga menunjukkan growth, pertumbuhan. Kalau kalian, jadi kalian ini agak filosofis ya. Jadi kalian mungkin perlu bertanya ke diri kalian, saya terakhir kali gugup kapan ya? Bisa jadi kalau udah nggak pernah gugup berarti kalian berada di comfort zone, nggak ada growth-nya. Tapi kalau kalian gugup, kalau mau ngomong di Zoom gugup, nah itu berarti ada growth-nya, ada pertumbuhannya, kalian belajar. Kalau gugup salah kan berarti ketika kalian berani mencoba, kalian belajar. Ada tumbuh. Tapi kalau di zona nyaman, nggak pernah gugup, menghindari anxiety, kadang-kadang juga bisa negatif juga. Negatif aspek itu kadang-kadang perlu kayak anxiety dan sebagainya. Karena itu menunjukkan yes. Okay. Any questions? Tapi yang definitely jangan, kalau bisa tidak ada tuh ya kayak tadi negative aspek yang berupa mencontek dan sebagainya itu kalau bisa diminimize sebagai guru kalau bisa diminimize possibility untuk mencontek ketika itu di skor ya yaitu dinilai dan sama gitu. Ya. Oke, so that's about it. No question. Yang ini kayaknya kita belum bisa menjawabnya sekarang. Tapi if you have any question yang menulis di sini, you can ask me right now. You can answer it. So, question? No?
Sir,
Yes, please.
saya mau tanya yang cuman mastiin ulang yang washback aja itu, Sir. Berarti it's like how the students feel when they do the task or this assignment that the teacher gives to them.
It's not only feel, but also what they do in relation to the learning. Jadi basically WOSPEC is about the effect of the test or the effect of the assessment on learning. So when you become a teacher, you're gonna need to design a test or an assessment, right? As a teacher, you need to consider whether the test or the assessment that you are designing will have benefits, will have good effects on learning. So, well, mungkin tadi saya salahnya bilang bahwa anxiety itu negatif prospek. Sebenarnya enggak juga sih. Jadi anxiety itu bisa disimpulkan bahwa anxiety itu bukan negatif prospek. Tapi satu hal yang pasti ya, negatif prospek itu kayak mencontek tadi. Atau mungkin anxiety yang over anxiety. Over anxiety itu dalam negatif prospek. Jadi ketika eh, tadi UN ini menentukan UN dalam beberapa hari ini menentukan belajar selama 3 tahun itu kan anxiety-nya over anxiety yang sampai kalau nggak lulus kan itu biaya 3 tahun itu ya jadi percuma gitu kan sehingga anxiety itu memicu mereka untuk non-tech dan sebagainya menghalalkan segala cara so that's negative prospect something like that. So negative prospect is more on efek terhadap pembelajaran sebisa mungkin tes atau assessment itu meminimalisir efek yang counterproductive terhadap pembelajaran. Something like that. Jangan sampai tes itu justru efeknya negatif terhadap pembelajaran. Jadi bikin nggak belajar, jadi bikin nyontek kan nggak belajar. Jadi bikin justru nggak termotivasi buat belajar gara-gara tesnya susah gitu. Tes itu kan sebaiknya justru memotivasi buat belajar. Tapi kalau tesnya justru memotivasi buat nggak belajar, nah itu berarti dia negative prospect, something like that. Kalau bisa ya kayak gitu di minimize. Is that answering your question? Good.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Jadi efeknya kalau bisa positif. Any other question?
Sir, can I ask question?
Okay, yes.
So, misalnya gurunya mengajar tapi ternyata ada there are negative feedback and the teacher cannot menghadapi itu atau ya kalau misalnya gurunya itu tidak bisa meminimalisasikan negatif feedback itu.
Okay, that's a good question, but it's actually beyond the scope of language testing and assessment karena terkait dengan mengajar ya. I mean, in this class, we focus more on the testing and assessment. Bagaimana mendesain tes atau assessment. Assessment berarti pengukuran kemampuan siswa kita kalau nanti kalian jadi guru ya. Bagaimana kita mengukurnya atau mengetesnya. Nah, fokus di kelas ini adalah we're focusing on how to design or how to do test or assessment related to language skill or language ability of our students. Karena bagi guru kan harus itu, harus mengukur dan melaporkan. Makanya namanya testing and assessment. But then, jadi tadi prinsipnya adalah when we design or we do a test or assessment, we need to try at least or think of the washback. Ya. We need to think of the washback. Efeknya terhadap pembelajaran kayak gimana ya? Kalau bisa efeknya yang positif, kalau bisa. Nanti ada. Ketika efek tes atau assessmentnya negatif, we need to question again, right? Whether the negative washback is worth doing or not. Whether the negative washback is worth preserving or not. Layak untuk dipertahankan atau enggak. Kayak anxiety. Ketika anxiety menjadi efek dari sebuah tes, as a teacher we need to think whether the anxiety is really needed or not. Whether the anxiety is really a sign of growth or not. Atau jangan-jangan anxiety yang nggak relevan kayak tadi. Ujian anxiety nggak lulus terus kontak itu kan justru negatif prospeknya ke semakin negatif. Kalau negatifnya anxiety untuk public speaking, it's still worth preserving karena otentik ketika public speaking memang yang dilakukan itu dan pasti ada anxiety di sana, something like that. So tergantung negatif prospeknya nanti kalau bisa ya positif terhadap pembelajaran. And then getting back to your question, kalau di pengajaran gimana? Kalau pengajaran sebenarnya belajarnya berarti di classroom management sama language teaching methodologies. Kalau ada kelas, termasuk yang teman-teman di UPY ya, kalau ada kelas language teaching methodology atau classroom management atau apa ya kira-kira profesi kependidikan dan sebagainya yang ngomongin tentang motivasi belajar atau strategi belajar dan sebagainya bisa ditanyakan di sana. Jadi, as a teacher for me probably kalau ada negative aspect dari pengajar ya, bukan dari tes atau assessment, probably try to accommodate more strategies. Coba strateginya divariasikan, modal belajarnya divariasikan. Mungkin jangan dikasih handout terus, mungkin dijelaskan pakai PPT. Mungkin jangan dikasih penjelasan pakai PPT terus, mungkin dikasih video. Mungkin jangan penjelasan terus, mungkin dikasih aktivitas grup. Mungkin jangan aktivitas grup terus, mungkin dikasih game atau dikasih quiz gitu ya, yang nggak dinilai atau yang dinilai tapi formatif sih Pak. Something variasi sih mungkin ya. But you need to confirm that to dosen atau pengajar di kelas ya pengajaran. Does that answer your question, Audrey? Tadi Audrey.
Yeah, yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. Any other question? No? Okay, as I promised, we're gonna need to end this at 9 o'clock, right? So before we end this Zoom session, let me help you with what you need to learn next. Sebenarnya ini agendanya hari ini, tapi nggak bisa selesai. So, hari ini idealnya kita akan belajar tentang school curriculum. Jadi di sini saya sudah post ada PowerPoint, kemudian ini kurikulum merdeka yang dari kementerian gitu. Sama ini contoh-contoh kurikulum versi sekolah. Jadi, excuse me, kurikulum yang dari kementerian itu kan kemudian diturunkan ke kurikulum sekolah. Jadi masing-masing sekolah itu bikin kurikulum. And then dari kurikulum diturunkan ke syllabus, and then from the syllabus, teachers will need to design lesson plan. Jadi urutannya itu selalu kayak gitu. If you open this PowerPoint, you're gonna see some concepts and theories about understanding curriculum. So now you see my PowerPoint, right? So in the PowerPoint, you'll be able to see what curriculum is and how should you design a test from curriculum. What steps do you have? Yeah. So that's why di sini ada cycle of test development. Test development cycle itu biasanya dimulai dari why dulu. Makanya di sini ada objective, right? Jadi ada why. Kenapa sih saya perlu ngetes? Gitu. Gunanya apa sih tes saya ini atau assessment saya? Kemudian after you determine the objective, tujuan tesnya apa, tujuan assessmentnya apa, you can design the test specifications. Test specifications ini namanya blueprint atau kisi-kisi. Kisi-kisi tes itu kayak outline-nya, kerangka tesnya. Jadi ibaratnya kalau kalian nulis itu kan ada paragraf, ada teks. Sebelum bikin paragraf atau teks, kalian bikin kerangka dulu, kerangka teksnya, kerangka paragraf, misalnya, kerangka essay, misalnya. Begitu juga dengan tes. Kalau kalian bikin tes atau assessment tuh, kalau bingung, belum terbiasa bikin tes atau assessment langsung, ya berarti buat kerangkanya tuh kisi-kisi namanya, atau blueprint, something like that, atau test specifications. Itu berdasarkan why-nya tadi, ya di sini kalian bikin kerangkanya. When you think of the test specifications or the outline, you can need to think of the what, right? Apa sih sebenarnya nature dari skill ini, dari topik yang perlu saya tes tuh sebenarnya apa sih? Kayak gimana sih dan what-nya kan di sana. Dan kemudian baru nanti masuk ke how. gimana sih saya ngetesnya? Nah itu mulai masuk ke di sini juga sih sebenarnya, di kerangka tesnya akan seperti apa, kemudian task itemsnya seperti apa, atau test itemsnya seperti apa, butir-butir tesnya akan seperti apa, pertanyaannya kayak gitu, kayak gini, kan how-nya, gimana sih ngetesnya. Kemudian jangan lupa how-nya juga ada di scoring procedures. Kalau instrumen tesnya udah jadi, kalian mulai berpikir nyekor apa menilainya kayak gimana ya? How do I score the result of the test? So then you're gonna be developing rubric or answer key, something like that. Or checklist, ada checklist juga atau ada yang lain. Kalau uh, assessment atau ya assessment ya biasanya berupa portfolio, mengumpulkan portfolio, pekerjaan-pekerjaan dikumpulkan menjadi satu portfolio. Biasanya bisa jadi menilainya dengan checklist, dicek gitu. Lengkap tidak, gitu. Submit enggak, nah itu checklist, bukan rubrik. Kemudian make appropriate evaluations. Baru kalau instrumennya sudah lengkap, instrumen tesnya sudah lengkap, nilainya sudah lengkap, baru kalian bisa membuat appropriate evaluations. Nah itu tes gitu. Evaluation itu ya maksudnya menilai. Kemudian bikin raport itu kan reportnya. Kalau bikin uh, rekap nilainya, dapat A, dapat B, dan nah balik ke yang saya sampaikan tadi, ada curriculum, syllabus, and lesson plan. Kemudian ada assessment atau tes. Urutannya pasti selalu dari kurikulum. Kalian harus tahu kurikulumnya itu apa yang dipakai. Ajar SMP, kurikulumnya pakai apa ya? Oh, kurikulum Merdeka. Harus tahu kurikulum Merdeka itu apa sih? Yang diajarkan bahasa Inggrisnya apa sih? Topiknya apa aja? Kemudian dari kurikulum diturunkan menjadi kurikulum versi sekolah. Dan kalau sekolah sudah punya versi kurikulum bahasa Inggrisnya atau semua mata pelajaran, kemudian dari kurikulum sekolah diturunkan ke silabus, ke silabus. Urutannya selalu itu. Curriculum dan silabus. Dari silabus itu kan rencana pembelajaran selama satu semester atau selama 1 tahun juga bisa. Tapi ya satu semester. And then after you have the syllabus, you're gonna have the lesson plan. Kalau lesson plan biasanya per meeting itu akan aktivitasnya seperti apa? Jadi rencana lessonnya per meeting itu akan seperti aktivitasnya. Makanya namanya lesson plan. Atau kalau dalam atau sebutan lainnya bisa juga module. Kemudian setelah ada lesson plan-nya kan baru kita bisa mendesain assessment atau tes gitu. Atau kadang-kadang dari silabus juga bisa sih kita mendesain assessment atau tes. Terutama kalau berupa UTS atau UAS, ujian akhir atau ujian tengah itu kan biasanya langsung dari silabusnya, gitu ya. Nggak dari lesson plan. Tapi kalau kuis itu ya pasti melihat dari lesson plan. Karena per meeting tergantung di meeting berapa mau dilakukan di awal, di tengah, atau di luar kelas kalau penugasan dari lesson plan. Any question kalau ada? Nah, what about kurikulum Merdeka? Gimana? Kurikulum Merdeka tuh di kurikulum yang tadi versi kementerian itu ada yang namanya capaian pembelajaran. Capaian pembelajaran ini objektif yang harus diajarkan dan diukur di kurikulum. Levelnya kurikulum, cakupannya. Kemudian dari kurikulum capaian pembelajaran tadi diturunkan menjadi silabus. Nama lain dari silabus dalam kurikulum Merdeka itu istilah yang dipakai guru-guru. Kalau kalian nanti kerja sebagai guru di sekolah, itu mereka menyebut silabus dengan untuk saat ini ya, alur tujuan pembelajaran atau ATP. Kalau nanti ganti menteri, terus kurikulum merdekanya diganti kurikulum jenis lain, bisa jadi istilahnya berbeda lagi. Tapi intinya istilah umumnya itu kurikulum dan silabus. Nah, dari silabus atau ATP kalau versi alur tujuan pembelajaran diturunkan lagi ke lesson plan. Kalau guru-guru sekolah menyebutnya lesson plan itu bisa disebut sebagai RPP atau yang lebih sering dipakai sekarang modul aja. Nah, jangan lupa kalau sudah ada silabus sama modul aja berarti perlu for assessment sama pendidikan. Bikin instrumen sama assessment. So kalau diringkas ya capaian pembelajaran yang di kurikulum diturunkan jadi tujuan pembelajaran di silabus, kemudian diturunkan lagi jadi kegiatan pembelajaran di lesson plan dan penilaiannya gimana. Nah, kita fokus di penilaian aja. Nah, kalau kalian pengen lihat, emang Pak Endar bilang kurikulum merdeka itu kayak gimana sih contohnya? Kalian bisa klik yang nomor 7, T4, capaian pembelajaran bahasa Inggris. Kalau yang dari kementerian itu sebenarnya jumlah halamannya beratus-ratus, nyampe 1000 enggak ya, saya lupa, tapi beratus-ratus. Nah, ini sudah saya potong-potong, saya ambil yang versi bahasa Inggris saja, yang kurikulum yang capaian pembelajaran bahasa Inggris saja. Nah, di sini kalau kalian lihat atau download, di sini ada CP dari mulai SD, jadi kurikulum merdeka itu bahasa Inggrisnya diajarin dari SD until SMA, until SMA. So from elementary school till senior high school. Nah, di sini CP-nya ada dari mulai CP SD, bahasa Inggris SD sampai di CP SMA ada di sini. Silakan dipelajari. Nah, ini contoh CP. Tadi Pak Ender bilang di kurikulum merdeka skillnya nggak cuma 4, ada 6 kalau nggak salah. So, di sini ada menyimak, ada berbicara, ada 2 ya. Kemudian ada membaca, memirsa, 4 skill. Kemudian ada menulis, mempresentasikan. Nah, see? So, berarti pembuat kurikulum merdeka ini melihatnya secara kebijakan tuh, mereka melihat bahwa language proficiency itu kalau zaman sekarang tuh bukan cuma 4, tapi ada 6. Jadi tergantung yang dimasukkan di proficiency. Menurut kalian tuh ya enggak? Kalau jadi guru SMP, SMA, SD, ngajar bahasa Inggris, siap-siap pelajari kurikulum. Ini kurikulum merdeka. Versi pemerintah berarti masih umum. Dan diturunkan ke tadi dari kurikulum ke silabus. Nah, di sini kalian bisa ke meeting 4 yang nomor 8 ini. Ada curriculum syllabus examples ya, and lesson plan. Kurikulum yang sekolah tadi. Bisa dilihat kalau kalian will be able to see this. Contoh-contoh silabus atau ada di sini. Jadi dari kurikulum yang tadi kita lihat itu sebenarnya diturunkan ke kurikulum operasional sekolah. Jadi, ini yang versi sekolah sudah lebih spesifik sedikit tapi masih karena masih semua mata pelajaran kalau nggak salah. Nah, kemudian dari sini yang kurikulum bahasa Inggris versi sekolah kemudian diturunkan ke yang namanya silabus. Silabus rencana 1 semester biasanya atau 1 kelas juga bisa 1 tahun. Nah, sini silabus ini makanya formatnya ini contoh format. Biasanya ada meeting pertama atau minggu pertama ngapain, minggu kedua ngapain. Dan dari silabus diturunkan menjadi lesson plan. Kalau lesson plan atau modul ajar, ini ada beberapa contoh dan menjadi contoh. Nah, ini sudah lebih fokus lagi ke pertemuannya. Pertemuannya topik ini diajarkan di beberapa pertemuan, kan? Di masing-masing pertemuan sampai. Nah, baru di situ kita merencanakan menilainya, prosesnya. So that's what I tell you. Nanti belajarnya sendiri-sendiri di rumah ya. And then we'll discuss next week tentang kurikulum merdeka dan perangkat pembelajaran di SMP. Penting karena nanti kalau kalian ngajar SMP berarti ya dilakukan. Any questions before we end the Zoom? Maaf, agak terlewat 15 sampai 20. Any questions? No? If not, that not yet. Okay, thank you, Audrey. If not, then don't forget to sign the attendance. Jangan lupa kalian presensi ya. Jangan lupa presensi. Jadi coba saja. Yang belum presensi silakan presensi. Yang sudah, you may leave the Zoom everyone and I'll meet you next week. Hopefully we can meet face to face ya next week. Jam 7. Yang dari PY sudah sign. Yang dari KDW sudah semua. Yes, very good. So I'll meet you next week after face to face, hopefully. But stay tuned in our WhatsApp group for further announcement. Yeah. So thank you for joining and have a good day. Bye bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, saya izin tanya, Sir.
Oh ya, silakan. Kita ya.
Oke. Tapi ini another class, Sir, di Applied Linguistics.
Oh, oke, berarti saya stop recording.
Iya.